Well, we're back for episode 4 of the Logan and Faiez Show.
Episode 3.
Episode 3.
Yeah.
We're back for episode 3 of the Logan and Faiez Show.
It's Friday, guys. We normally record on Wednesdays, and we're doubling up this week, so this is new to us.
We're doubling up, and we may have also been talking for 20 minutes and forgot to hit record.
Yes, that was probably my fault.
But that's okay.
Well, that is my fault.
We were just getting warmed up, and so now you've got us fully warmed.
Yes, you do.
Well, we've kind of been talking about what the purpose of this show is, what we want to explore while we're here. And I think we're still discovering that.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of feels like two dudes talking about their feelings right now.
Yes.
How we're trying to become better men and sort of the emotional and mental experience of what that looks like in our day-to-day lives. And something that you've reflected to me is the importance of having relationships like this. So like, what is that for you? You know, what do you look for in a guy friend?
What I look for now is definitely different than what I looked for in the past. And I don't even know if I was ever really looking for anything specific in guy friends. I think it was more about just being social in the past. Now, I need guy friends that are on the level with me. And what I mean by that is there's got to be a spiritual component. There's got to be an entrepreneurship component. Most likely, there needs to be a relationship component. There doesn't have to be a kid component, but it definitely helps, I think. You know, we've talked about it before where timing is everything, and it's not to say that I can't be friends with somebody that is single and has no kids and works a 9-to-5 job, but it's going to be tough to find anything relatable, I think. Not to say it can't happen. There are exceptions. And I've had this talk with Casey a lot of who can I spend my time with? And I find it no coincidence that now me and you are doing this podcast together, because it's really making me recognize, oh, you're my guy. Like, I can talk about spirituality with you. I can talk about entrepreneurship with you. I can talk about self-development with you. I can talk about relationship stuff with you. Even though you don't have kids, I can talk about kid stuff with you because you're planning on having kids. I have to be able to get to deeper layers with somebody. And if I can't do that, then there's probably not going to be a relationship or a friendship. And it's nothing against that person. It's just, those are the things I need to be able to talk about. I can't talk about just sports and surface layer stuff anymore. So those are the things I most look for if I'm looking to build new relationships. Because as we all know it, relationships take a lot of energy, and I want to give as much as I possibly can if I meet somebody that I want to give that energy to. And if there's no ROI on that energy exchange, if I'm not getting anything in return, then I'm just not going to want to put in any effort. It's not that I don't care about that person. I wish them the best, but there's just not going to be, we talked about the other day, there's not going to be harmony between us. It's always going to feel like one of us is trying to build a relationship as opposed to just letting it organically happen.
Mm-hmm. A part of me wonders if that happens for everybody with age. I don't think so.
I don't think so.
But for me, I've always craved deeper relationships. I'm not very good at small talk. Actually, small talk drains me. It takes energy out of me. But sitting and having a deep conversation gives me energy. Like, I leave inspired, invigorated. Yeah. I have energy after that. But I think I used to feel a sense of inadequacy for only thriving in deep relationships. Like, I should be good at small talk. I should be able to have surface level relationships. And as I've gotten older, I think I've reframed that for myself, and I appreciate that about me now. And I'm like, no, it's okay. I thrive on deep relationships.
I think there's a time and a place for any type of relationship. And I have to say small talk with people and clients that are coming in here through the studio, and that's fine. That's what is needed in that moment, and I can do that. But if I'm putting more energy into building something special with another human, then that's not the time and the place for that.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. So now there's layers of relationships, right? And there's probably objectives to different interactions with people. So like the objective of my relationship with you is actually personal, right? It's, I want to fill my cup. I just want to enjoy our conversation with one another. At work, the objectives are different, whether it's in sales or internally. And so rather than looking at myself as there's something wrong with me for not enjoying small talk, I've reframed it now as, oh, there's a skill that I can acquire there in order to be able to move in the world of business and create relationships in order to grow whatever I'm working on. And there's like kind of a feeling of detachment about it now.
Yeah.
It's a skill.
Yeah.
And I can treat it as a skill because I can get better at skills and I'll have to identify with the skill. And then I enjoy it. I can look at it a little bit more objectively. And I can also appreciate our head of sales who is just really good at it. And that's who he is. And we're different.
Yeah.
Which is why he's a great teammate for me. And I've actually recognized that for myself, that my best partners professionally are people that are really good at building rapport with people quickly. Because I'm really bad at that. I take my sweet time getting to know people, and we go deeper, like layer by layer by layer over time. But that doesn't work for a sales cycle. You know what I mean?
No.
So I have to pick my partners. Yeah. Actually, I don't think I even pick my partners carefully. For whatever reason, I attract them because I think my thoroughness and depth is probably the feeling of inadequacy I have about not being able to build rapport quickly. They feel that inadequacy about what I'm good at.
It's the yin to your yang.
It's the yin to my yang.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Casey always, especially when we moved into our new house, we've been there a couple of years now, I could easily small talk with all of our neighbors because I do look at it like, if that's where I need to meet them, well, I'm not going to not be connected to our neighbors, not have conversations with them. And if that means I have to have some small talk with them, then I'm going to do it. And I'm going to be good at it. And I'm going to have some rapport with them because they're our neighbors, I'm not going to tune them out in a way. And Casey saw that. She's like, I need to be better at that. Like, it's fine to have the deep conversations with the people that you're closest to. And it's also fine to just have surface level conversations with people it's having that boundary still, like you said, of not taking it to a point where it's draining your energy. Like, what that relationship is, and it's small talk and it's surface. I know that with my neighbors, and that's cool. And then I don't overextend. I get out when I need to get out, and I'm like, okay, see you later. Good chat. Talk to you later.
Yeah. And that's okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's been helpful for me to recognize as well.
What's we're talking about working on that skill or recognizing that it's something to work on. What's something else that you're working on these days that you've noticed about yourself?
In the last episode, we talked about viewing fear as a signal, as probably something to go deeper into. And like what we're doing right now is totally that for me. Talking about my feelings publicly is not my forte. And so every time I'm publishing one of these clips where I'm speaking my mind, all of my fear signals go off of like, I don't even know if I can articulate it. I just start thinking about what are other people going to think about what I'm saying and who I am.
Yeah.
And it's like super freaky. And so I'm just like, I also recognize that I've had the desire to do this for a very long time. And so to achieve anything that I want, I have to do and overcome a certain number of things that I don't want to do. And so I'm proud of us for sticking through these last few episodes, at least.
Yes.
Where I know both of us see things that we don't like.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's okay. We're committed to getting better at it. So, yeah, I feel good about that. What about you?
I'm definitely something my focus is on right now is really trying to be less reactive in situations and more responsive. And it doesn't happen a lot. I think, and again, not to make excuses, it's just when you have kids and energy is low at times. And it's not so much that I'm reactive with them, just reactive maybe in situations with Casey where I know it's something that she's bringing up that I need to work on, that maybe we just didn't have the best communication about it. And then I get a little more defensive. So for me, really taking a beat in those 5 or 10 seconds to be like, okay, what's my response going to be here instead of a reaction? And it's why I know it's something that I have to work on. It's not just because Casey's pointing it out to me. It's because once it's done, it's such a moment of like shame for me. And I hate that feeling. I hate that I hate myself after it happens, and yet I can't stop it in the moment. And it's by no means horrible. It's gotten way better over time as I've matured and I've done my own self-development. I've done therapy and I've done spiritual work. But there's still these little moments where Casey says it perfectly. She's like, it just needs refinement. It's not such a like big fix or you're doing something horribly wrong. Just refine it a little bit more. And so that's where my focus has been lately.
What relationship brings that out for you the most? Is it with your kids?
No, actually with Casey. It's with us. It's tough because we both definitely hold ourselves to a very high standard of how we move through the world, whether it's emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. So when a quote unquote, say, mistake happens, I'm already going to be pretty hard on myself. And so when Casey brings it down on me too, that is that perceived criticism or perceived attack from her that I'm seeing because I'm already feeling it towards myself.
Yes.
When I get a little heated, it's more so we all know this, it has nothing to do with her. I'm just so upset at myself.
You already feel bad about yourself.
I already feel so bad. Yeah. And then I just compound it by like making it worse.
Yeah.
And I know where that comes from. I've been digging into it. It's when I have a long commute in the mornings, usually like 30, 40 minutes. So I've been like unpacking it, thinking about it. And I know where it comes from. And I know it's still some underlying dad issues there that I'm really trying to dig down to another layer of why haven't I released this? Why haven't I let it go? Why haven't I healed from it? Why do I still have probably some anger towards my dad? And so trying to figure that out and unpack that a little bit more.
I relate to that completely. Like when I am very conscious of a thing that I'm basically judging myself for and wanting to improve and trying to work on it. And in my head, I know of all the moments where I overcame that and did a good job. But if there's one moment where then I fall short and then somebody else calls me out for it, man, that's like where the most defensiveness comes up for me. And I have to try really hard not to justify my actions, because what the other person sees as me justifying, when in my heart, I know that I agree with them.
Yeah.
I'm just having a really hard time with it.
Yeah.
Visibly and verbally.
Yeah.
And so miscommunication happens there. And then I have a really hard time with the word heal.
Why is that?
I feel like I don't fully comprehend it. I talk about this with Heather all the time. And in the privacy of our home, I kind of rant against the word healing. It almost feels defensive. Like, honestly, I don't know why. I think I'm just sharing that I kind of have a reaction to the word, and I don't know why. So I'll attempt to maybe explain. Or
real quick, while you're thinking about it, it does make me think, because I just listened to our whatever it was, episode 0 or 1, where you were talking about the relationship with your dad or things in your childhood, that you had said the line essentially that you could start to unpack it, but definitively you couldn't say what it is.
Exactly. That's what bothers me.
And I think I think about it differently. I think you can definitively get to a point where you're like, oh, this is what made me this way. This is the trauma that caused me to now have these reactions. And for me, that's what I look back at is I'm like, okay, well, how do I heal that so I no longer have these reactions or responses or triggers that come up? And I can only say in my experience that because I've done some of that work, that there are a ton of triggers that now no longer come up because I've healed and found, and for me, healing could take on a number of different definitions, let's say. Healing might be actually getting an energetic healing where something quantum or spiritual is released from me energetically that I can't logically explain, but there's a lightness now in me, a darkness that has been lifted, that now I no longer have that reaction anymore to an old traumatic pattern, let's say.
Okay. It's about the pattern. So I think I agree with the outcome of healing.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe the process I think I relate to a little bit differently. So I actually don't believe that I can definitively understand where my trauma responses come from in the past. Like from childhood, I think I have a best guess based off of memory at this point. However, I do know definitively what causes me to have a reaction in this moment. And that pattern may originate from somewhere in childhood, but at least my practice is if I feel defensive right now, I could write down right now that I feel this because this just happened. Like I can state it as a fact. Like Logan just said these exact words to me and it made me feel this way. Mm-hmm. And then I can assume I could, if I wanted to, be like, well, why? Like what happened in my childhood that is making me relate to your words that way?
Yeah.
I don't really spend too much time going down that path as much as I do. Just every time I feel that defensive feeling, writing down what happened and what I'm feeling. And then over time, I'm like, man, I'm writing this down over and over again. How do I want to behave or respond differently? And I found that that works for me in terms of rewiring my response. And then that letting go of that pattern then happens because I've like brought it to my consciousness so many times.
I think that's such a big part of healing is you just have to bring that stuff from the subconscious to the surface. And whatever your methods are, techniques of doing that, in your case, it's the writing it down and bringing it up and seeing how many times it comes up. In my case, it's the technique of like looking back to see what it's connected to. And I'm like, okay, I need to bring all that up to the surface and then release it. Figuring out how to release it, I think, is the healing part. Maybe that's a better word for you. Just release instead of heal.
A water in a canyon is the visual that comes up for me. I want the water to go down a different path. And so it's like what you're saying about refinement. For me, like the word carve comes to mind. Like I just want to start carving a different pathway, a different response. So
which would be like writing a new narrative.
Writing a new narrative. Yeah. 100%. So yeah, I mean, maybe it's healing, maybe it's training. I think for whatever reason, I respond to the words differently. So,
which is what we were talking about with communication and talking with people, like whatever resonates with you or whatever works. Like you said it the other day with recovery of, well, I don't want to, if identifying as an addict works for you, great. But if it doesn't work for you, then maybe just don't do it, And if the terminology that works best for you is more carving a new canyon or carving a new path, perfect.
I was talking to a friend yesterday about how much time should you spend basically working on your weaknesses. And we were having a professional conversation. And he was like, shouldn't I just try to stay in my strength? And he was trying to figure out like a move to make. And I was like, it's less about the should. in my opinion. I spent a lot of time kind of shitting on myself about what I should and I should not do. And it's like in any given moment, we have an objective. We have a thing that we want to happen. And we have a certain set of tools available to us in that moment in order to achieve that objective. And I may in that moment be able to rely solely on my strengths because I have people around me that can compensate for my weaknesses and we can achieve the objective together.
Mm-hmm.
Quite practically, I can pay someone else to do the thing that I don't want to do.
Right.
But then there are times where I can't pay somebody else to do the thing that I don't want to do. And in that moment, if accomplishing that task, getting that task knocked out is required to achieve the objective, then that's just a moment where I have to confront my weakness. I have to try to do the thing that I don't want to do or may not be good at as best as I can in order to hopefully get what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's less about on principle only doing the things that I want to do or am good at because that's on principle the right thing to do.
Well, there's also no risk in that. Just doing the things that you're great at all the time. What kind of reward do you get from that if you don't take the time to overcome the adversity that is your weaknesses or that are your weaknesses?
Is it even possible to only do the things that you're good at all the time?
I don't think so.
Because how can you be good at things
if you don't
do
things that you're bad at?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's again, when it comes to like your friend or colleague's question of like how much energy or time should be put into working on your weaknesses, as is everything with anything of an individual, it's a spectrum of, well, how's it serving you?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I go back to it always. I think about in my case, in my experience, I have to work on my weaknesses a lot, especially when it say comes to my relationship or my marriage or my family. I don't want to say it's not a choice, but if I don't work on those things, the people that rely on me and depend on me are going to start to not be very happy with me.
Mm.
And I think if you're single and only dependent on yourself right now, you have nobody dependent on you, you're not in a relationship, better now to start working on those weaknesses and get that muscle in check. Because if you do think about down the road being in a relationship or a marriage or having a family, when those weaknesses are put smack in your face because you have those reflections from your partner or from your children, you'll already know how to work on them.
Like, what's your response to personal shortcoming?
Yeah.
Is how I think about
Yeah.
it. You can either be a reactive, deflective person, an avoidant person, a justifying, unaccountable, or at any given moment, you can practice the accountability muscle.
Yeah.
And when somebody reflects something uncomfortable to you, or you recognize it in yourself, okay, how do I respond to the signal that we keep talking about?
Did you have, this makes me think about accountability. Prior to Heather, did you have anybody that was really holding you accountable?
My parents.
Yeah.
I mean, I met Heather when I was 23, so can't say I lived a whole lot of meaningful adult life before then. Other relationships, but we're talking about the next question that we were going to ask each other, what we're working on is what we're proud of, something recently. And accountability is actually something that I'm proud of. So we just did our Q1 reviews at work. And one of the things that I asked the leadership team to do is give everybody else feedback. And I wanted to share what you think each person on the team's superpower was and one thing that they need to improve. Almost everybody said that my superpower was accountability. But if you asked me, a group of people 10 years ago, what my weakness was, it was accountability. And I was like, that felt so good to be like, and the thing is, I was really hard on myself about it.
Yeah.
Because I would never stick to things because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I would try things and then leave it, try things and then leave it, and try things and leave it. And it came off in my family as he's not reliable. You can't count on him to stick to a thing. And to now be like identified as somebody that can be relied on, that can be accountable to himself and keep others accountable, I was like, that felt like a really nice full circle moment for me where I was like, I worked really hard, and now to be recognized for that felt good. So yeah, good job me. But I mean, I'll continue to focus on it because it could go away. I'll never take that for granted. You know what I mean? Like, I can't bring yesterday's victories with me today. Like, each day is its own, and we got to climb that hill every day. Like, we could do something right now, and I could choose to respond one way or another. I could take responsibility for it or not. So, what about you? What's something that you're proud of yourself for?
I know this is going to be a bit of a general response, but just my parenting skills lately. I feel like I am setting a good example for them. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I've had a couple tough reactive moments with Casey at times of low energy or being tired or whatever it might be. But overall, I think about what my energy is around my kids and what they're witnessing and what they're seeing and the time I get to spend with them. We talked about this the other day, a little bit of work-life balance. I think that's an illusion. I don't think it exists. And I think my kids are getting the best of me most of the time, which is a really good feeling. You know, like, I'm doing my best to be present with them when I'm with them. Obviously, no phone. That's the easiest way to just take a gauge on things. But I do feel like I'm typically not thinking about work, not thinking about anything else. I'm very present with them. I'm very active with them. Our conversations with my son are just like incredible now. I think I'm good with engaging with him and having him think, which is fun. So I'm really proud of being a parent right now. It's been 3 years and then 16 months with 2 kids now. And I feel like both Casey and I are really starting to get the hang of it, which feels good. Obviously, I know there's going to be still a ton of curveballs thrown at us. Sure. You know, in similar fashion, when we talk about we've gone through enough in, say, business or entrepreneurship or self-development or whatever, where we've overcome a lot of those fears, overcome a lot of the weaknesses, overcome a lot of things that we just didn't know we were doing or weren't aware of. And now I've done enough parenting, at least, to know, oh, we're pretty good at this. Like, we got it. You know, anything that comes up, like, we got it. And that feels good to have that with parenting.
You know what a good job looks and feels like.
Yeah.
So even if
I know, which then in turn, I'm hyper aware of when I'm not doing a good job.
Right. Yeah. And then you know how to get back on the horse.
Yeah. And I think Casey and I are getting better. Maybe something that I'm proud of is asking for support in a proper way, or just asking at all, instead of just getting frustrated that my partner isn't doing something that I wish she would do. And that, oh, it's probably not as obvious to her as I think it is, and I should communicate it to her. She's getting better at communicating that support with me, which makes the family function in a much more harmonious fashion. When we just ask for help in the right way. It's funny, it's such a simple thing just to ask for help, but also not just asking for it, but again, communicating it properly.
Like staying in the I.
Yeah.
Right? Like, instead of
you don't do this for me.
Exactly.
It's, hey, I really need your help with this.
I really need your help
because of this reason or whatever. And I think that for me, when I'm looking at like the whole big picture of how I need to be better, whether it's parenting, partnership, business, it always comes back to, as long as I'm remaining heart-centered, it's going to be good. The asking for the support comes out in the right way. You know, it's our negative ego that's in our mind. So if you're able to stay more in your heart, that negative ego has less of a chance to kind of rear its ugly head.
Interesting.
And so if I can remain more heart-centered, it's going to be a better example for my kids. I'm going to parent them better. I'm going to be a better partner. I'm going to ask for support in the right way. I'd like to think I'm a very, very kind person with all the strangers that come in here for renting. but I'm sure there's moments where I could possibly come off wrong. And maybe that's a day that I just got too like mental about things.
Mm.
So continuing to do the work to remain in my heart is something that I'm proud of, I guess.
When I die, but if there was a book of all the people in my life and like the one thing that they helped me with, that would be your line in my life.
Thank you.
Is the awareness of heart-centeredness. I'd never considered that before you started bringing that up to me, because I'm a very mental person. And yeah, that feels good.
Thank you, by the way. I haven't always been that way. Here we go, look back to childhood a little bit. I think I always had a very big heart. I think my heart definitely came from my mom's background, the Korean side of things, and just the way they care for family members and everybody in their community. Everyone just has really big hearts there, and they're very open with their heart. I think just over time, mine really closed up. And that could be a number of things, from childhood and trauma and adult life and going through those party years and things like that. And not having masculine role models that led with their heart. So when you get like 35 years of nobody to look to that's doing it that way, it was a hard lesson for me to learn that was happening, for one. And then even a harder lesson to figure out how to open it up.
Do you have male role models that are heart-centered in your life now?
I do, from our spiritual community. But I don't have contact with them all the time. But at least there's enough of it, whether it's on social media or in the ethos, that I can pick up on the men that are kind of leading that way.
Do you have to... Sorry, keep going.
No. Yeah, so it's not necessarily that I'm like meeting with a mentor every week or something like that, but at least I know what it takes to operate in the world that way now. There's resources now, and I know how to access those resources. And access it in myself.
You can be your own example at this point.
Yeah.
Does the balance go awry in the opposite direction as well? There's being too mental and not enough heart-centered. Can you be too heart-centered and not enough mental?
I think so.
We all have to live in the world, right? And in the world, there are people that take advantage of other people. And I can feel come up for me that overextending on being heart-centered, and not using my mental faculties for discernment and critical thinking could potentially lead to me getting taken advantage of.
Yes.
And so, granted, I could become too critical. If I stay in my mental, overextend on the mental, I'm overanalyzing, I'm critical, perhaps pessimistic. So balancing out with my heart, that feels good, being in both. But so when I ask, like, if I overextend on the heart side and the mental goes down, is that equally vulnerable for different reasons?
I think so. I mean, I think about, you're using your mind to really carry out the action of your heart. That's how I might look at it. And if maybe you're weighing a little too heavily on the heart side, yes, everything's all love and light and be kind and joyous, but it's not really the heart that's going to create the life that you want. It'll give you the ideas and the thoughts and the direction, but you're still going to need the mind to carry it out. And that's where I think understanding that balance of heart and mind, I guess I could say for me, it's recognizing one isn't controlling the other. Understanding that they're each a tool, and how are they going to be used in that given moment.
Yeah.
And I think you can only get to that place of understanding which one is required if you start to have some sort of practice where you know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you know, am I being too mental? Is my mind getting in the way of this? Or am I being too heart-centered right now and maybe somebody at work is walking all over me and I'm allowing this to happen because I'm not stepping in to my mind and saying, I need to take some action and do something about this.
The way that you just framed it, it kind of clicked for me within the lens of sales, marketing, or persuasion. Sales and marketing are just persuasion, right? Mm-hmm. I'm persuading you to take action on something that I want you to do.
Right.
If I'm just make a perfectly logical argument to you about why you should buy something from me, it may or may not work. If I make a perfectly emotional appeal to you about why you should buy something from me, it actually would probably, depending on who you are, it may or may not work. But when I can blend both the emotional appeal of who you'll become, who you could be by buying this thing from me, and backing it up with some compelling stats, the mental, the logical, it's a done deal.
It's the balance.
Those are the best.
And it's taking it one step further. It's the balance of these two that's also in balance with how that other person is going to receive it. You know, we talked about that communication. Maybe they're the type of person that's a little more mental than emotional. So you might want a little more of that mental sales, that logical sales to them. Maybe you have somebody that's super emotional and they're like, I'm going to buy this because it makes me feel so fucking good. And then that's where you sell the emotion. So I think it's, again, understanding that other person so you know where to meet them, then understanding yourself so you know how to combine both the heart and the mind to carry that out.
That is spot on. So we actually have, so I know multiple sales people. I can think of two specifically, and they both succeed and suck at selling to different personas. One wins with a heart-centered approach all the time. And those are typically people that are bogged down in a situation. And by talking to this salesperson, they feel better. They feel better.
Yeah.
And so then they buy. But that person, when they're dealing with somebody who's just allocating capital, they're typically selling to a corporate entity or a startup that raised 100 million, and they're just deploying capital. They're trying to make reasonable bets that they can justify to their board. They fail every time because they don't know how to make a logical case for what they're selling.
Right.
But this other person fucking wraps those deals up consistently because they're just great.
It's numbers.
I'm giving you the case, and you can take this case to your board or your boss. Done. You've proven why you made that decision. But when they have to sell to the person that needs to feel, they just need to feel good about why they're going to do this, it doesn't work. So that's but if you could combine two into one, now that's a person.
That's where it's at. And you know, circling back around, that's what makes such good relationships with whatever person you are relating with, whether it's your wife or your partner or a best friend or somebody you just meet. Can you match their frequency mentally and emotionally through their heart? Going completely full circle now to what the first question you asked me of, what do you look for in a friendship now? I think that's it. Can we match? Can our frequencies blend and be harmonious mentally and emotionally with our minds and our hearts? How that shows up is going to be different for every relationship. But as long as those frequencies can blend, those vibrations can blend, which is really only just a feeling. Like you just know it when you have it with somebody. Like I just know it. I have it with you. Which makes it super obvious when I don't have it with somebody, because I can immediately go, well, this doesn't feel like me and Faiez at all.
With friends, it's easier because it's like, well, do I want to be around that person or do I not? Right. Like it's you get to volunteer your time with friends, right? Like you're not required to spend time with a friend.
And that goes back to, do you know yourself well enough to know what you do and you don't like? If you know yourself well enough, you'll immediately know if you want to be around somebody or not. But if you have no clue of what your preferences are, or if you have no clue what your preferences are, then how are you ever going to know what type of friendships you want to have or relationships that you want to have?
Yes. The relationships that I desire have changed since I started to relate to myself differently. And if I relate it back to the accountability, as I've strengthened the accountability muscle within myself, I am more appreciative and desiring of people around me that can help me get better at that. Whereas when I was really bad at it, that used to make me feel like shit, and I didn't want to be around people like that.
Yeah.
And so by learning to relate to myself differently, I was able to hold, I was capable of having a different kind of friend. And so now if you ask me what I want in my friendships, I want people that challenge me. Yeah. I want a friend that can say like, hey, pause, you're talking too much. Like we need to recalibrate this, right? Like I want people that can call me out so that because I can take it. Yeah. Doesn't mean that, you saw me for the next day, I was like feeling bad, right? But that's okay. Yeah. I'm not afraid to feel bad because I relate to the feeling of being bad differently now. I see it as a signal for something that I care about and I want to improve on. Exactly. That I can refine. Yeah. And I bring that to me in the workplace, in my marriage, like everywhere. It's honestly, I think I'm in an era in my life, and I will go into a new era at some point. But right now, I think I'm working so hard on the accountability muscle because I failed at my last business. One of the key learning lessons was like, dude, you got to be more accountable to yourself and others. Like, you can't let that happen. We're not going to let that happen again. And so I'm probably overextending right now because I'm trying to get really good at it. Where if I'm being constructive with you, which I'm very focused on being constructive, and like you can't handle that, then I don't have time for this relationship. Yeah. This isn't a good fit. I can only be around people that are very interested in taking accountability for their actions. And so I expect you to tell me what I need to hear, and I need you to be ready to hear what I need to tell you as well. And then we're going to iron sharpens iron. We're going to become better together a lot more quickly than if we did it by ourselves. And that shit's intense. Yeah.
We're doing it right now.
Yeah. It's intense, but like I'm very like, that's what I want in the people around me right now. And I am more inviting of that energy. It's very uncomfortable. Like getting feedback fucking sucks.
It's the worst.
Like I don't think that shit's ever going to feel good. But
no, because you have to admit that it's something that you have to get better at. Or the other way of framing is, oh, I suck at this. I need to get better at it, which is the hardest to hear from your partner, which is why I still need to work on that defensiveness at times with Casey.
100%.
Because it's just, I know she's right. I know she's absolutely right. But man.
What do you think about this? So I had a mentor that reflected this back to me one time. Because I told him, I was like my worst qualities, like my anger. I really don't get angry at people except for my parents and my wife. Those are the only people that get to see my anger, and it comes out in moments once every 6 months or whatever. We're
similar. That's what happens with me.
Like I get fucking crazy angry. I was basically like, what's wrong with me? Like, why do I really need to work on this. Like I need to get better. Why do I only get angry with the people that I care about the most? And he was like, maybe it's because you feel safest with those people. And so you know that if you misbehave, that they're still going to be there for you. And I was like, that's fucked up. Like, because these people love me so much, because I know that I can get away with more. I'm taking out like I'm expressing my lower qualities with them. I would actually like to reverse that, I think.
Same. That's where I'm at too.
And so ever since he framed that up for me, I don't know that it like, light bulb and I changed automatically, but I keep thinking about that. And I'm like, I would like to refine that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be my best with people outside of my
That
home.
see you very seldom.
Yeah.
That
And then
spend
not
very little
bring
time
that
with
effort
you. Yeah.
to the people that love me the most.
Mm.
So I don't know if that resonated.
That's huge. No, that's actually really huge. I'm glad we came to that at the conclusion of this episode, because that's a piece of me that, again, needs to be refined. And I need to look at it that way too. I've been so much better with my dad and my mom. My dad, I just haven't talked to as much, so it's easy to not get upset. But it's something that I'm being super cognizant of and conscious of when I'm chatting with my mom now, because I did a lot of years of, she saw probably some of the worst of my anger, especially in like teenage years, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was a good Friday episode.
Yeah.
If you made it this far, again, we should probably start saying this at the beginning, that if you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe, because who knows who's making it all the way to the end.
Yeah. Like, subscribe, comment, like, why'd you listen?
Yeah.
Did you get anything out of it?
Is there anything you'd like to hear us talk about? Perhaps.
What's going on with you?
Yeah.
Well, that was a good Friday therapy session. Appreciate it.
Love you, man.
Yeah, love you.
Until next
the next time.